Welcome, newcomers. The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
Welcome and thank you for tuning in to the 412 Double Play Podcast. A happy Festivus to all. I am your host, Michael Castrogano. With me, my Double Play partner, Ed Wassel. And joining us for this Festivus holiday, writer for Buck's Dugout, co-host of Talk the Plank podcast, Connor Williams. Thanks for joining today. Happy Festivus, guys.
I'm the first baseman, right?
Of course.
Well, if the Pirates wanted to save more money on first base, they could have just signed me.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll talk about like exactly what's going on with that and the overall feelings as far as whether or not they're making good decisions this offseason. But it's interesting because before the show, I was looking at some of the transactions they've made and any kind of like how it correlates, because the whole thing with Sherrington was this offseason we're shopping in a different aisle. And basically
that
it's
was
like, okay,
what Mackey said, but there have been comments made that like we're trying to win more than 84 games. I think that was the specific quote that he gave like back in September. I mean, it was clear that the organizational goals this offseason were shifting.
And ideally that's going to have some impact on the record next season and hopefully something for to be optimistic about. I mean, jumping into it, this past week, re-signed Kutch, $5 million 1 year, worst kept secret in baseball, I think. You and I both wrote articles this week about Kutch coming back. One of the big things in his press conference was that he suggested that he wants to play 2 more seasons and that he's not hanging it up after this one. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, there are 2 things that I think as long as Kutch has, he's going to be a productive hitter. As long as the foundation stays there, and as long as the eye. Well, there's 3 things: the foundation, the eye, and the bat speed. As long as he has those 3 things, I think he'll be fine. I think he's still going to be a productive hitter. You know, it's just that those 3 things, any one of those 3 things could go at any time. Obviously, the tear in the Achilles, that gives you some pause about the foundation. The elbow injury might give you a little bit of pause about the bat speed, because the bat speed, while it held up very well in the first half, I think it was obvious that he rushed back from that, right? Because his production just absolutely fell off a cliff. I think part of the conversations that, and I don't know if they had these conversations, but I think that they needed to have with Kutch was that, hey, we don't need you to be that guy anymore. The best ability for you is availability. We don't need you rushing back from an elbow injury while we're hopelessly spiraling out of contention. That's not the guy we need you to be. And because the problem is that if they ask him to, I don't think Kutch has that built-in ability to say, no, I need more time. It's just not how he's built.
I think a lot of Major League Baseball players don't want to say, oh yeah, put me on the bench, coach. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I need more time down. And Kutch is a competitor. He came back and he's wanting to win. And potentially, if his Achilles, like you said, is okay, play some spot starts in the outfield. I think that they're assuming he's probably going to play a decent amount of time as the DH spot, but I think that the hope is that he'll be able to, spot some time in left field, spot some time in right field. I was listening to Pitching In with Fort and Mackey, and Mackey said, oh yeah, he might be able to go in center sometime. I was like, his defense that's a little ambitious in his good year. I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think I think even more than being a competitor, I think there's been a lot of times in Andrew's career where he's been, using air quotes here, fine, right? That he's just playing through something. And
Yeah.
I think Henry Davis is that same way. Henry Davis tried to play through a broken wrist. I was talking with John Baker. This is a side tangent. I was talking with John Baker. Media was talking with John Baker in Altoona, and I was there. John Baker was like, we have to strap Henry down to a chair to stop him from playing 162. You know, it's just how these guys are built. And I think that was a conversation that they needed to have. I don't know if they had it. But it just, if Andrew wants to play more than just past next year, I think that's, you know, being rested and not pushing it because you're going to be 37. That's an important part of that.
Yeah. And so going back off that, Davis, what did he have this year? Like a broken finger or something like that?
It was something.
And he was still...
No, it was like I think it was the injury they described it as was a hand strain. I've heard people mention that it dates back to the Miami series. I don't know. I just know that it, so they say, it affected how they deployed him. It changed the plan for him to be catching. It's hard to understand what they've done there.
All right. Well, if anyone is watching this, taking a break from the Steelers game, feel free to air your grievances in the comments, either Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Ed, based on the ability of Kutch and the fact that they're probably going to try to give him a little bit more reps, try to keep him healthy more often than not, what's the minimum amount of, like, approximately what amount of games do you see him playing in 2024 and being able to contribute to that capacity? That he posted a 115 WRC plus in 23, a 1.4 WAR. Like, how many games do you reasonably think he should be in?
Well, if he's going to mainly DH, I don't see a reason he can't be in 110, between 110 and 120 games. It still leaves him with 50 plus games of rest. So, I mean, you'd start throwing him in the field, and I have no idea.
Yeah, Connor, you agree on that?
Yeah, I do. Obviously, I think they hope that he can play the field a little bit, but I don't know how much he actually is going to, even if he is able to, because I think ideally you build a roster that allows McCutchen to stay at DH pretty much full time. I think they've made some strides toward that with the Olivares trade. I like Olivares, but I really don't like this outfield defensively. Sawinski's okay in center field. If the version we have of Reynolds going forward is the defensive version we have of Reynolds is the version we saw in 2023, that's not great. And Olivares grades out, despite all the tools, grades out very poorly in right field. So I still think they need to add, because I don't think Ji-Hwan Bae is the answer there. His routes are pretty horrendous. And he's also left-handed like Jack, who is the center fielder currently. So ideally, if you push Jack back to a corner with a center field acquisition, like a Michael A. Taylor or a Kevin Kiermaier. But more realistically, you're probably, if anything, you're probably looking at like a defensive-minded center fielder. Well, obviously, you would always be looking at one of those because the outfield defensively is so bad, but more of like a defensive substitute or backup, because I don't think, because that's the role that Bae was deployed in this year, and I'm not sure how exactly of a good fit that is for him. So maybe they trade for like a Robles, or maybe they sign like a Bader. I would assume Bader would find a starting job with a team like that was rebuilding or something, just to try to reestablish some value. But I mean, they've got to figure out something there, at least on paper, because I don't see how it works.
Yeah, I would assume that Bader's going to get some sort of starting spot. Right now, looking at the outfield, as you said, Reynolds in left, Sawinski in center, Olivares, I don't know why I can't say his name ever, is in right, And then I guess the bench spot is either Palacios, or if they wanted to give another shot to Kanan Smith and Jigba, who I am.
Well, I don't see how you could use that bench spot on anything other than a center fielder. And Bay's shown he's at least capable.
I mean, yeah, he was worth exactly 0 outs above average last year. I'm just looking at Baseball Savant, and so I'd have to see like the breakout. He took, like you said, he took some really bad routes similar to Sawinski, and then he'd make these crazy plays, but the plays were more because he had really great speed to make up for the fact that he looks lost out there. And
that doesn't mean that somebody can't emerge out of that group as a better center fielder than last year. But just on paper, I don't see how anybody other than Bay gets rostered for opening day at this point for your fourth outfielder, because Palacios has options. And Olivares is going to be on the opening day roster. So, you got to have somebody that is at least capable of playing center field. And I'm not sure that anybody other than Bay really currently is.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and try to get somebody else to be better than Bay, because the bat, despite he got the 4th most, I think, reps of anyone on the Pirates last year and had a negative WAR, or like very little WAR overall. So it was not a big contribution there. And then people have talked about him potentially being traded. I don't know what value he'd have, but
I think like, just to throw a name out there that I've already thrown out, I think G1 Bay for Robles works, because Robles is in the last year of his arbitration. Obviously, his arbitration has been rebought out for like 2.62 million, 2.62 or 2.65. But he's in his last year. He's in his walk year. And the Nationals have Dylan Cruz. They have James Wood maybe coming in the next year or two. So maybe they want to take a shot at Bay. They offload some salary with Robles for a player that honestly isn't going to contribute majorly to them this year. And they just take a flyer on Bay. That's the kind of player you're looking at. And that's why I brought up Robles so much, is because I think specifically G1 Bay for Robles works.
That'd be
now,
interesting.
Obviously, that doesn't mean that, like, if they want somebody else, then it's whatever. But I think just on a pure value standpoint, I think that's the kind of player you're looking at in a straight return. Because as bad as Bay was and as fundamentally poor as he is, the years of control, and he does have at least one tool with some upside, the speed. Maybe you get a little more defensive value out of him as he develops those fundamentals. So the years of control plus the speed, you're not looking at much, but you are looking at least something, maybe a salary dump or something like a Robles.
Yeah. Salary dump for, you said 2.6 million?
Right.
So not even like a huge, that would be kind of a pirate pay, like big salary. So we could talk about the outfield, I think, at length, but looking at some other moves this past week and kind of staying on the Kutch news, Kutch and his wife Maria announced on yesterday for us, that they are expecting a baby girl in March, making 4 kids in the McCutcheon household. So glad he gets to, he'll probably be in spring training for it, but glad he gets to spend time in Pittsburgh for the birth of his 4th. And the corresponding move, which for some reason got a lot of people on social media talking, was a DFA of Andre Jackson, whom we had picked up off waivers from the Dodgers mid-season. Ed, Connor got to talk a lot, so I'm going to go back to you on that. What are your thoughts on Andre Jackson? Allegedly, reports are coming out that he's looking for opportunities in Japan, but what are your thoughts on him being the name dropped at this point?
And it wasn't necessarily surprising for me. I think everyone knows that bullpen pieces are some of the easiest to replace. They're literally everywhere. I mean, could you have picked another player? Yeah, but for me, it was whatever. I mean, more surprising is the reports that he was looking at, the option to play in Japan. If you have the opportunity to play in the major leagues, that's what you do.
But he's more likely to get to be a starter there. You go to Japan and then you start, you show that you can pitch there.
Yeah, he could come back his value by going over there.
Well, it's the Thomas Hatch thing, right? Because Thomas Hatch also went over, and he's going to be a starter there.
Yeah, and Thomas Hatch wasn't somebody who any other organization in baseball should say, oh, yeah, I want him on my 26-man, because he was out of options. Right. I'm not sure if Jackson had actually, I think he did not have any options left. So that made it more of an easy cut. Bailey Falter's someone who is without options and likely I thought was going to be the other piece there. But Connor, what are your thoughts on Jackson? Was mostly used as a piggyback starter, and he did really well first time through the order. But
I mean, he's an arm, right? I think he proved that he's not a capable major league starter. I think that the Pirates were just in a very terrible situation that they mostly put themselves in through trades, but also some of that wasn't their fault with injuries. But it's just, I think he proved he wasn't a starter in this league. I think maybe he could be fine as a bullpen piece, but the track record for that also isn't particularly great. So I thought it was possible he would be the corresponding move anyways, regardless of whether or not he would get opportunity to pitch in Japan. Because I know some people wanted Alika, but how many people in your 40-man can actually play shortstop adequately? I mean, we don't know about Cruz coming back from injury. Yep. Peguero has had defensive struggles there. Nick Gonzalez isn't a shortstop. Bay isn't a shortstop. So it's just those two players with big defensive questions. So maybe, and we saw how bad it was defensively and offensively there for them after Cruz got hurt with Marcano and Castro, who were both woefully inadequate defensively there. So keeping like an insurance policy on the 40-man with Williams might not be like the worst thing ever. And that's, I know people were saying that he should have been the move or whatever, but it's fine. There's more fluff to cut here, right? There's more fluff that's going to be cut in trade. There's more fluff that's going to be cut in DFA, but it's not as much as, when they were rebuilding, right? There's not as much fluff you're willing to lose. So eventually they're going to have to make some decisions. I think they're less than enthused about making, but you're going to have to make if you want the team to be better. Yeah. Like, do they still have faith in a CSN, for example? Hits the ball really hard, pounds it into the ground. Historically, a really patient plate approach. Are they willing to cut bait with him? They should be to get a better starting pitcher. But those are the kinds of decisions you're going to have to make.
It's very likely that another team sees his value. I've always comped him to like a Brandon Nimmo type player. So I'd be very upset if he goes somewhere else and then excels instead of here.
I think he is more raw than Brandon Nimmo.
Well, yeah, Brandon Nimmo's in like year 2 of a $90 million contract.
Well, more raw power, I mean. Because Kanan's got big, broad shoulders. He's a strong boy. Just the problem is his swing path is more built for doubles and ground balls. And, maybe the hit tool isn't there either, but it's just, he's always been a guy to me that like the Dodgers would take a flyer on him and turn him into a 750 weak half of a platoon guy,
I mean, they've got some pitchers they might need to get rid of because I'm sure they're going to sign Snell next or Montgomery this is our airing of grievances. The fact that they signed Shohei to a contract that's only going to pay him a net of $2 million in 2024 through 2033, and then they were able to use that savings to sign Yoshi Yamamoto. I'm sure you have strong feelings about that. What are your thoughts on, because, and this isn't like the Dodgers are going out, they're trying to win, not just
I
division.
have no problem with the Dodgers. They're just doing all that they can legally through the rules. There's nothing wrong with anything that they've done. I do think the deferrals on that contract are a little ridiculous, but there's no limit on the deferrals. They're playing by the rules. And if a player if the player is willing to do it, then I've got no problem with it. My problem is with baseball's economic system and with Bob Nutting.
Yeah. So let me go back on that. So there are playing by the rules. However, the Pirates played by the rules when they signed Josh Bell in the second round for $5 million back in 2011 or 2010, whatever year it was, or gave a well over slot contract to Tyler Glasnow, and were able to get all these. I mean, Bell, I think, was the big one. And then MLB changed the rules, so you can't do that kind of stuff anymore. And that kind of felt like they were suppressing these small market teams from taking advantage of the biggest outlet they have, rather than signing these giant contracts for players. So is this something that when the CBA comes up in a couple more years, I think 2027...
it's going to be a war. That CBA is going to be a war. As it stands right now, there's a lot of... I think there's going to be less infighting with the owners than we expect. I think they're going to... Because generally the owners kind of don't like to bicker with each other. They're pretty hesitant to do that sort of thing. I also think the majority of them are probably very interested in a salary cap floor system. So I think there's going to be less infighting with owners about things than some people are saying. That said, between the owners and the players, yeah, that's going to be a war. And if for the owners to get what they want, which is a salary cap floor system, there's going to need to be a lockout, and it's probably going to cost them a year. I mean, it's just how it is. In the NHL, to get that cap floor system, that cost them 2 years. But that said,
hopefully we don't lose 2.
No matter how much MLB's union wants you to think that they're special, they're not. And the reality of that is that the owners can hold out longer than they can. So if the owners really, really want something and are willing to lose a year or more to do it, they're going to get it.
At least we've got a couple years before that happens, and hopefully the Pirates can be competitive in that window. Another move that they made this past week, and will possibly corresponding move trigger a bunch more people online. Martin Perez, southpaw from the World Series winning Rangers, signed, not official, pending physical. As of right now, hasn't been confirmed that that's been completed, but 1 year, $8 million. So he got a Vince Velasquez, or he got a Rich Hill type deal. I think Velasquez was for 1 year, $11 million or something. Ed, what kind of impact does Perez have on this roster? I mean, adding a second southpaw for the first time since, I think, 2016.
I mean, currently, his biggest impact, hopefully, is just to be able to pitch innings. I mean, we saw last year how thin we got near the end of the year. I mean, if we can have, I'm going to say a plethora, but at least a decent amount of starters that we can spread out a little bit, hopefully we don't run into those kind of injuries again. I mean, pending physical, so hopefully he's not too beat up now either.
Well, I think that has more to do with the 40-man situation than anything else. And it also has to do with, where Perez is in the offseason. I don't think that's anything more than a formality. But it's just they probably want to make space on the 40 in other ways rather than having to cut somebody.
Yeah. Mackey alluded ahead of the Kutch press conference that a trade might be coming, or that some sort of news like that would potentially overshadow Kutch's press conference could be coming. Didn't come to fruition. He also infamously posted Perez's stats over the past 2 years, which are heavily weighted by a strong 2022 season in which he had a 2.89 ERA. Last year, I mean, he was solid the last month or so, mostly out of the pen, but ended with a 4.45 ERA, which is kind of in line with his 4.44 career lines. It is, and I don't want to say like, is he an improvement over Bailey Falter or Quinn Priester or
because he clearly is. It's just, is he enough of an improvement? That's the real question. It's fine depending on what else they do. I feel like, because I think there's some traits there with Perez that they've certainly worked with in the past. Similar to a Jose Quintana or a Tyler Anderson. I think they understand that they have had success with that class of pitcher in the past. And best case scenario here, he regains his 2022 form. Worst case, he gets hurt. Right? But as long as he's somewhere in the middle and gives you 160 innings of 4.5 ERA ball, I think it's fine for what they signed him for. That said, in totality, I don't really like the Marco Gonzalez move. I'm really worried. I think that nerve injury is bad news. There aren't a lot of pitchers who have had it. But the ones that don't have a good track record post-injury. Now, that said, I don't know the specifics of, it was a clean out of the anterior interosus nerve. It's a nerve that controls pronation of the wrist. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know exactly what the procedure entails. I don't know if there are any details or context that I'm lacking there. But just going off the track record of the injury, it's not great. And the track record of other nerve injuries, also not great. So in totality, they clearly haven't done enough yet, but they could do enough by trading for or signing a guy who could legitimately be a good mid-rotation or frontline starter.
All right. Well, I'm going to use that to pivot to my next topic here, which is whether they've had a better or worse offseason to date than last year. Because at this point in 2022, as of like December 23rd, the Pirates had added Carlos Santana, Vince Velasquez, Austin Hedges, Harlan Garcia, traded Kevin Newman for Dari Moreta, traded prospect Nick Garcia for Connor Joe, prospect Jack Hartman for G-Man Choi. They grabbed Jose Hernandez in Rule 5. They had a couple other players signed in either minor league deals or DFA'd and traded for prospects, but nothing substantial standing out at this time. But this year's ads, Marco Gonzalez, as you mentioned, Rowdy Tellez, Edward Olivares, Martin Perez, and Kutch, and that's pretty much it. Again, some minor league deals, McKinney from the Yankees, but honestly, not as much as last year, not as much. And we've got the benefit of hindsight because a lot of people didn't like Velasquez at the time. But is this...
There are also, Jose Hernandez also threw a lot more innings that I think some people expected him to, or at least I expected him to, because I expected that to be, them stashing him, and he ended up actually pitching a lot more than that.
Yeah, and was decent. It was at least really good the first couple months and kind of trailed off. But is this a significantly worse offseason?
It's hard to say. I think it's certainly the market's so much slower this year. I don't know. I think I would say it's about the same, just with everything considered. It's such a hard question to answer, just because it's not over yet, and because the market is so much different.
Yeah, relative to the market, because nobody was doing anything, and the Pirates have kind of been making a lot of moves the past few weeks after doing nothing in November, and then for the most part during the winter meetings. Ed, how, as far as like comparing to the market, like Connor said, how do you feel that they stand, and what positions do you think that they need to still make changes?
I agree. It's probably fairly even. I think last year at this point, they probably did in my opinion, a better job filling the biggest gaps that were in the lineup with first base and starting pitching. We definitely still need at least one more starter. Another outfielder isn't out of the question. I'm not even sold at first base with Tellez.
There's also the possibility they add another catcher, because who's your starting catcher right now? Is it going to be Davis? Are you going to go with DeLay or Ali Sanchez? Or like, you can't be comfortable with any of them, because
no,
none of them.
I mean, you have to hope that Davis, progressed enough to be able to be your starting catcher. DeLay is a good backup. Sanchez, I'm not very familiar with, but I don't think you want to take up.
He has a really good track
record. What do you
catcher.
mean? He was with them last year.
He was with us last year.
He was one of those offseason acquisitions.
It was December, and we had him for like 2 weeks. So yeah. He was
him and Lewin Diaz, because Lewin Diaz Lewin Diaz lasted like 10 days, because I think they claimed him off waivers. It was either from the Orioles or the Marlins. I think it was the Marlins, and they had him for 10 days before they signed Carlos Santana, and he was the corresponding move for Santana.
And I think Diaz went to the Orioles or something. So they were last year's. This year, that's Rodri Munoz, because he only lasted 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, forgot about him.
Yeah, I asked Mackie yesterday when he was doing his every so often chat whether or not they're going to make any moves to try to get a bullpen piece, because there's still plenty of really talented relief pitchers. Phil Maton's out there, who I really like. Let me look at my list of potential pitchers. Like, there are I wasn't ready for this, was I? Brent Suter, and I think Dylan Floro is still out there too. He was a closer for the Marlins. But speaking of the Marlins, because I made that segue myself, there are a number of young pitchers that they have. Certainly have been rumors that the Pirates have been tied to discussions with them in the past. They've got a little bit of a transition in the front office. Obviously, Connor, I'm going to go to you on this one. Who, if anyone, from the young rotation or young army of arms that the Marlins have available would you think matches up best with a potential trade for the Pirates?
Well, who matches up best, or who I would most want?
Well, I mean,
because I haven't really looked into most of those guys, but I think the easy answer is Jesus Luzardo.
Yeah, I agree.
As far as your question about bullpen goes, I don't think they're going to make any more. I don't think they're going to make a Yarlin Garcia ad. I think they have enough guys that they don't need to go pay free agent prices to relievers. If anything, it would be a trade. And just to throw another name out there, another national, Hunter Harvey. I think in his second to last year of arbitration, probably going to be owed like $5 million. How much value does Hunter Harvey have to a team like the Nationals?
All right, so Bay and Selby for Harvey and Robles.
I think that could. I think you do need to, because Harvey is so good, you do need to throw in another piece there. Maybe another lower level pitching prospect. Nothing too major. It really just depends on how willing the Nationals are to move Harvey, and it's just a name. But I can't see a scenario in which they are paying free agent prices for relievers with the amount of arms that they have on hand.
Yeah. Ed, who
as far as I'm sorry, as far as
no, go ahead.
Other starting pitchers on the market, obviously there's Dylan Cease, but the price for him is going to be exuberant. The Mariners are dangling some pieces out there. I don't really know if the Pirates have what the Mariners are probably looking for. I think the Mariners are probably looking for major league bats. And I don't think the Pirates are in high supply of those. So if those fall through, maybe you see somebody like Paul Blackburn or somebody else in that class. And it's part of why I'm disappointed that they didn't go after a guy like Michael Wacha, because the upper end of the trade market, that's going to be some exuberant price for that guy, especially if that pitcher has more than 1 or 2 years of control, like a Logan Gilbert. I know Dylan Cease has just 2 years of control, but the price on him is going to be exuberant. The price for Jesus Luzardo is going to be exuberant. And you're going to have to overpay. Right. You're going to have to overpay to get those guys. And you're going to have to overpay even more for somebody on the Mariners, because the Mariners aren't looking for what you have. If a deal could even be done, if a deal could even be made. So it's disappointing that they didn't go a little bit higher in the free agent tier, like a Michael Wacha, or, there's still time to go after like a Lucas Giolito or somebody of that caliber. Because with Marco Gonzalez and Martin Perez, if you're looking to the trade market after that, you're probably going to need to look high.
I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us, grab another lefty with Shoto Imanaga, but seems like that's probably be like a 5-year, $90 million. Ed, as far as potential trade options, who would you be most inclined for the Pirates to bring back? Any team, any pitcher who's been bandied about as potentially accessible?
Man.
And then we'll do our airing of grievances.
I don't know. That's tough because, like we were just saying, the return for one of those guys is going to be probably more than what they're worth for a 1 or 2 year rental.
Yeah. The only prospect
in Pittsburgh, but
yeah, the only prospect who is off limits right now is Paul Skeens. I'm higher on Termarr Johnson than, for some reason, a lot of people, even though he was just drafted last year. But the only one that they're saying, okay, you can't ask for Skeens because there's potential. I don't think it's absolutely going to happen, but there's a potential that we'll see him in PNC Park in 2024.
I very much doubt that. Or Skeens or Johnson?
Skeens. Johnson, I'm thinking 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
I certainly think it's possible. I don't think it would be a disaster if he wasn't, like everybody seems to think it would be. It's a guy, he's never pitched on 5 days rest before.
Mm-hmm.
He's also pitched less than 7 professional innings. He's in some seriously rarefied air now, just already being in AA.
Yeah.
So are we really the only other guy who I can think of who's done what Paul Skeens is trying to do is Strasburg,
which is the common comp for him.
Which is one of the comps for him. Is it a complete disaster if he doesn't pitch until August? I don't think it is. So,
especially if we're not in contention.
And I think that, right, because there's no pressure to add him to the 40-man yet. So I think everybody penciling in his name in like June or July might be getting a little ahead of themselves there.
Yeah.
Because he certainly can. He's talented enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's saying a lot, considering that there are very, very few guys who have done that.
Yeah, no, he's incredibly talented. He's an easy number 1 for the prospects. Right. But as far as like the fact that they want to give him at least some time to work on making a little bit more crispness to that slider, and like you said, getting adjusted to the workload that is entailed with playing Major League Baseball, because he was going 1 time a week. He was the Friday starter at LSU, and now he's might be every 6 days when he's in Altoona. Might get him to like every 5 days when they get to Indianapolis if they kind of try to get him a little bit more ready for that. But it's going to be a different kind of horse race when he gets to Pittsburgh. So All right, Ed. This past season was another struggle. Even after a strong start to the 2023 year, we had a really fun April, and then just trailed off pretty much the rest of the year. What are your biggest grievances for the Pirates from 2023 and going forward?
Man, biggest grievances. You really broaden that area for the whole season.
I'm all right. I'm just gonna go first. I'm gonna go first because I know you're never ready for it. My biggest grievance is we always expect these top prospects who have been drafted, whether it's 1-1 with Henry Davis, or I think Nicky G was 1-7, or someone who's been successful in the minors like Endy, to come up and show some level of success in the major leagues. And it's so frustrating when they don't. Even Jared Triolo, who was extremely overperforming his numbers that last, in September, like, he's just we're only looking at him defensively, but he was a top 30 prospect on pretty much any list, and he came up and was terrible. Like, none of these guys are showing the kind of
terrible. He already had over 1 WAR. By the time
that
he
might
was
have been just
down,
defensive.
Well, he was hitting 280 with an on base of 350, wasn't he? I mean, it wasn't like he was some bum. Yes, the OPS was in the 600s, but it wasn't like he was some bum. I'm going to disagree with you there.
Yeah, it was a lot of singles. But, like, all right, Triolo wasn't a good example, because Triolo overall, I think, was very productive. 3 drinks in, I'm doing great here.
You could have just with development throughout the organization.
The development throughout the organization is just frustrating because they get to AAA, and CSN's another one. I'm a huge, when we do our top 30 in a couple months, I'm probably going, if he's still with the organization, probably still have CSN in that top 30, because I'm such a believer in his eye and his ability to make contact, and the fact that even with a partial season in AAA, the dude stole 23 bases. I think that he's an incredible talent, and then he comes up to the major league and was kind of on the bench a lot, had some spot starts, but batted 125 and 30 some at bats, something like that. It's frustrating to have these guys reach the major leagues and seem wholly unprepared for it. So that's my first grievance today. I'll drop Triolo because my thing with him is that I think that he's extremely likely to regress in 2024.
Oh,
so
well,
those lofty numbers. Yeah. Those lofty numbers are going to come way back.
His BABIP was 440. That's not sustainable. But I will point out that was also, a complaint levied against Reynolds' rookie season. His BABIP was extremely high. It was 395. So it's saying that is an indicator that there was a lot more to like about Reynolds. He certainly hit the ball a lot harder, but Triolo hits a lot of line drives, and that creates, naturally high BABIPs. Obviously it's not going to create BABIPs that extreme. That's going to regress. But is Triolo eliminated from being a productive major league player because of that? I don't think so.
No, I mean, at this point, I'd say he should be the second base, number 1 option, depending on what they decide to do with Peggy and Nicky G. And that's mostly based off his defense and high floor.
I could see that. I think it's going to be a legitimate competition with whoever they bring into camp, because I think one of those 3 guys is getting traded. One of those 4, really, because I know Bay was absolutely awful there defensively. But you could include any of those 4 guys: Bay, Gonzalez, Peggy, Triolo. One of those guys has got to go.
100%. All right, Ed, go ahead.
Because I'm not even sure there's enough reps in AAA for all those guys.
Yeah. Ed, do you have a grievance on this?
I've got a grievance, and I don't know.
Go for it.
There's got to be some people who agree with me here.
Oh, this can't be personally against me, though. That's the only disclaimer.
No. So with my shift that I work, I don't get to watch a ton of games. But every game that I was able to watch, it didn't seem to matter how horrible the home plate umpire was. Shelton did not protect his guys at all, like all season on any call. And that drove me nuts every single game that I watched.
Well, there was that one Padres game when everyone got ejected.
Well, 1 out of 1.
Was it Padres?
Good enough for me.
Padres. It was out west. It was like Padres or Angels or something. But
yeah, I think he got suspended one game after that.
Yeah.
Well, no, that was he got suspended because for Angel Perdomo hitting Manny Machado.
Perdomo, yeah.
That was what he got suspended for.
With the Padres. But that was after he got ejected, and wasn't like Oscar Marine like the.
No, I think those were different incidents because Derek Shelton was automatically ejected for that one, and I think it was it was in PNC. Haynes got ejected for something that Don Kelly had said.
Kelly, that's the
Shelton
only time
had
Kelly's
already
been
been
ejected. Then Kelly got ejected, right?
Right. Hold on. Let me, because I remember this. It was somebody. Hold on.
All right, you look that up, but we'll talk about this. I mean, it's a good point. Shelton frequently, at least as from a fan perspective, it doesn't look like he's standing up for his players. The guy gets hit, strikes, like balls are being called strikes for our hitters, strikes are being called balls for our pitchers. It's understandable because we've got that, projected strike zone.
So not to interrupt you here. Derek Shelton, bench coach Don Kelly, and pitching coach Oscar Marine were ejected by umpire Nick Lentz. So Andy Haynes was the manager, and it was something that Andy Haynes had said that Don Kelly was ejected for.
That's so ridiculous. All right, Connor, what are your thoughts on Shelton and his ability, I think, to stand up for, protect his players?
Oh, my camera's super out of focus there. I think there have been moments where it's been bad. I think there was an incident a few years ago in Milwaukee with Reynolds where it was just Reynolds was just getting hosed all game. And it was just Reynolds finally got himself ejected and Shelton didn't even come out of the dugout. That said, how much value is there in getting yourself thrown out of a game, right? And I don't think he's doing a bad job managing the clubhouse. Everybody who's played for Shelton seems to like him. So as long as that remains the case, I'm not really sure I have much of an issue with it.
I mean, I'll agree on that point. And Connor's the only one of the three of us who's been in the clubhouse and talked to the players who are actively part of that roster. So, Connor, going back to you, what are your grievances for
pitching
the Pirates team?
It's
right,
pitching
well,
dev hands down for me. Yeah. It's just they're committing the greatest sin that analytics can commit, which is that you find problems where there aren't, and you try to make everybody the same based on one or two traits. I think that's the sin that they're committing with pitching dev, at least at the major league level. Because what happened with Rowe was that they were trying to get more extension out of him because they really like pitchers with extension.
They love extension.
For those who don't know, extension is how far off the mound you are when you release the ball. So it can turn a 92-mile-an-hour fastball into a perceived 94 because you're not actually throwing from 60 feet 6 inches. You're throwing from, you get the point. And they messed with Rowe to get more extension out of him. And it backfired in their face so spectacularly that they didn't even know what was wrong at one point. They were taking him to, I think it was tread in some facility in Seattle to use a force plate, which is another grievance that I have, that they don't have a force plate in-house, because it's my understanding that most teams do, and then it's about a $50,000 install cost. Why they don't have that, I don't know. But just try not to find problems where there aren't any, because they're getting a little nitpicky here with body movement and extension or pitch selection. It's all a little too much here for me. I think there's a couple more hands in the pot than there should be with pitching dev, and I want them to cool it with that and let pitchers try to become the best version of themselves before they try to make them into something that they're not.
I agree.
Because Rose's not a big guy.
No, he's like
Rose
6 even, right?
If that. Okay, he's listed at 6'1", but I think that's a little generous.
Yeah, I think so too.
But he's never gonna be a pitcher that has great extension at his size. So I don't know. Obviously, you want good extension. That is a good trait to have. Mm-hmm. But when it's messing up all these other things, maybe it wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah. And hopefully this offseason he can use that time to kind of rebound, because right now he's looking as the fifth starter
lost.
or yeah. No, I agree.
And he's out of options too.
Yeah. That's the thing. Right now it's Mitch Keller, Marco Gonzalez, Martin Perez, Bailey Falter, and Rowe as our rotation. And
despite the need for pitching, if they see a package for another pitcher and they want Rowe, because of his situation with those no options and because of how lost he looked last year, you'd have to consider it. You'd have to.
It's selling low, but yeah. No, I understand. I mean, it's every possibility that he ends up in the bullpen, or I've heard people say that he could end up just being cut completely.
Well, they would
think that they're able to figure it out.
They would trade him before they cut him. Somebody would want him. They wouldn't, maybe they might not get much, but they will absolutely not cut him. He will not be DFA'd off the roster. I can guarantee you that.
Hope so. What are your thoughts on the organizational depth in pitching? I mean, as far as their top, I think only 2 of their top 13 or 14 on MLB Pipeline for prospects are position players. So there are obviously a lot of pitchers in there. But what are your feelings on those specific players? Like Skeens, obviously, league of his own. Jared Jones, Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solometto, Thomas Harrington. Like there's so many. Do you have a favorite? Do you have any that you're like concerned specifically about?
Obviously, I love Skeens. I agree with Jim Callis's assessment that he's the best pitching prospect since Steven Strasburg. Not only does he throw 100, but he can put it where he wants. He's got the build. He's got everything you would want out of a pitching prospect. Nearly everything. Now, past the obvious, I really like Anthony Solometto and I really like Bubba Chandler. I think Anthony Solometto's stuff is a lot better than people give it credit for. And I think his maturity is a big part of why he's been so successful as a prospect. He was the youngest pitcher in the Eastern League last year. And he showed more velocity in the early goings, then it trailed off as the innings piled on because he threw way more innings than he ever had before this year. If that can get consistent, man, I think he's going to be really good. And I think Chandler's upside is enormous. I think that the fastball has huge rise to it. He already has a changeup that flashes plus. 2 solid breaking pitches that I'm not super sure of. I don't think they tunnel well. But it's a good bet to bet on the athlete, right? And Bubba Chandler is insanely athletic. It is a very easy delivery, easy upper 90s, huge rise on the fastball. Betting on those guys is usually pretty smart. I think Bubba Chandler has much more upside than Solometo, but I think Solometo has a much higher floor because of just how advanced he is as a pitcher. And I think we saw that with Bubba because last year Bubba did something that he had never done before, and that was focus on a single thing in a single sport at, just full time. He had previous to this year, he had been either a two-way guy or a two-way guy and a two-sport guy. That was different for him. It was a different routine. He had to figure out how to handle the routine of a starter, of a professional baseball starter, and just that routine. And once he did, and once he matured a little bit, I think you saw a little more of that consistency and a little more of that upside that he has. So
yeah, his second half numbers last year were crazy.
The stuff is crazy too. Baseball America ranked his fastball better than Paul Skeens. I wouldn't go that far. With it, but it's not unreasonable. It's not unthinkable that his fastball is going to be better than Paul Skeens. I do worry about Jared Jones, though. I worry that he is more of a thrower than a pitcher. Because he was working all year to try to find a third option and never really settled on any one thing. The control wasn't great. I don't see how you can become a great major league starter or even maybe a good one with that kind of control and just not having a third offering.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same page. I worry that Jones could end up being a really good back end reliever, but the walks are concerning. And Solometo is one of my top pitching prospects because I think he's got the floor. I don't want to say the floor of a left-handed Kyle Hendricks, but he very much has that, but then with slightly better velocity. Because even when he was trailing off, he was still mid 90s. It was 93, 94.
It was,
but he's got really good control.
He got down into the low 90s again at the end of the year. He does have great control. The arm action is really funky. Watching him in person, it was pretty obvious to see why left-handers because in the start that I watched, at least, I think it was against the Akron Rubber Ducks or whoever it was.
Rubber Ducks, yeah.
They had a couple left-handers in their lineups, and they looked completely lost. I mean, it was not even. They didn't even look like they were double-A hitters. They looked like they were rookie ball hitters against them, just completely lost. And it's easy to see with that delivery why that would be the case. I do worry a bit that major league right-handers are going to get a really nice long look at him. But I think just the control is the X factor there. Not the control is the X factor. It's the control is what's going to keep him around. And the X factor is going to be if he can maintain that 94, 95, because he's another guy who also gets great extension.
Yeah. He's a big dude, long flailing arms, but excited for him, hoping that he ends up on top 100 lists in 2024.
Well, he's already on the top 100 lists.
I'd have to go and check. Oh, on Fangraphs?
I think on Fangraphs and Pipeline.
All right, I haven't checked it in a while, so I'll have to look into that. But any final words before we end? Any additional grievances that you guys have thought of?
You know what? I have one grievance.
Go ahead.
Altoona had a better spread for press than Pittsburgh did.
Oh, shoot.
Shots fired.
Shots fired, and also finding ways to not get invited back.
There was food in the Altoona press box. There was no food in the Pittsburgh press box. And I am all about that free food.
Dang.
Bringing up food. I think we've got another grievance, Mike.
What?
The funnel cake fries were only available at the box level.
So we went
available for everybody.
Yeah, that's also a grievance that I share, because I don't know what is going on with that usher situation, but it's still bad. It's still bad. If you're sitting down behind the home plate area, there's literally, even behind the home plate area, there's literally no vendors like roaming around, like just to grab a beer or grab a hot dog or grab a box of Cracker Jacks. There's none of that. So you literally have to leave your seat, and it makes the lines at the concession stands really long. And it didn't used to be that way. I don't know, because I think they might be outsourcing that through a third party hirer. I don't know what's going on there, but it's definitely a negative on the fan experience.
Yeah,
That's
especially now, you leave your seat, you might lose a whole inning.
Yep.
Yeah, it just moves too fast. I'm thinking that's potentially a reason why, but yeah, we went and they have the funnel cake fries was one of the new things for 2023, and we asked everybody about it. And we sit in the Pirates Baseball Club, so we're just adjacent to the suite, but not technically in the suites. And they said, yeah, that's only for the suite level. I was like, all right, well, next time, I guess. But yeah, it's just weird that they advertise something that is not generally accessible. Not okay, guys. Not okay.
Yeah, ideally, it's a little frustrating to see teams improve the fan experience by offering more luxury items or building more luxury suites, because that's not the majority of the fans. That's not the majority of the people paying to come see you. But that is a business side thing.
That's true. And the food is a big thing when I'm there. I go to Manny's or, I mean, just taking in all the different places. Manny's
the Quaker, is it Quaker Lube? Or I don't know what it's called. That's pretty good too.
Okay.
The wings.
Oh, Quaker Steak and Lube.
Yeah, Quaker Steak and Lube, that's what it's called.
That always sounds like an oil change place to me, but
well, it's kind of based off of a garage.
Yeah. All right, this is a great way to end it. Appreciate it, guys. All right, well, that wraps it up for all of us here today. Thank you to our guest Connor for joining us. You catch him on Talk the Plank podcast. Read his work on Bucks Dugout. Yep, Twitter, wins_Williams or X or whatever you want to call it.
Whatever they're calling it these days.
Yeah, I'm not even just gonna stick with Twitter. Follow me on social media at 412 Double Play. Ed at Ed_Wassel. Continue watching, listening to the show. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else podcasts are found. Thank you for joining us. Hope you guys are having a safe and happy holiday season. And from all of us here at the 412 Double Play podcast, let's go Bucks.
Let's go Bucks.